Right now, 800 million people in the world are hungry. 75% of them live on land that could feed them and the other 25%. And yet men and women farmers across the world are leaving their land because they can't make a living. Why haven't we been able to make a dent in this and the other many issues of poverty? You know, in the U.S. alone, we have over 1.5 million nonprofits, and our charitable contributions are more than $350 billion a year. Not to mention the $500 million of volunteer labor that we donate each year. You know, it isn't all aimed at poverty reduction, but a big chunk of it is. And we're only one of many, many nations around the world who are working on this problem. So why haven't we seen more improvement? In my talk, I'll address that question, and I'll tell how a child's play, a hurricane, and a dating site may have some clues for what we can do differently and better in the future. Let me start with a little story. One night when my daughters were little, about kindergarten age, they wanted to do a play, but you know, bedtime is drawing near and they're squabbling in the hallway about something to do with the play. They had a problem to solve. So I called out, "Hey, time's running out." In just a minute, they solved the problem, and Angela peeks around the corner and she says, "Adrian will play the part of the sick girl. I will be the godmother, and you'll know who God is because she will be the one in the rocking chair." As she said, we're going to take turns playing God because, as she said, it's not fair for one person to be God all the time. Well, you know, there's a clue in that about our poverty alleviation efforts. You know, I hate to think that when I first went to Haiti to work in the fields of poverty, especially in the areas of education, way back in 1990, that I was in some way playing God, but in a way to go with solutions in a helper mentality is sort of playing God in somebody else's life. Or it's setting us up in, if I'm a helper, somebody else has to be the helpee. You know, if I'm the problem solver, somebody else is the one with the problem. Well, those kinds of relationships are not very equal. They're not healthy. They come with a fundamental imbalance, and if we start with an imbalance in our relationship, the work that flows out of them will also have inequalities. In fact, they often lead to dependency and greater inequality, injustices, even corruption, sadly to say. You know, and that brings us to another point about why our efforts to eradicate poverty don't work. They've been action-based stories, if you want to think of it as a story. They have centered in the past around problems, programs, solutions, projects. You know, that just doesn't work. The issues are far too complex for that. Our stories have to be character-driven if they're going to work. Everyone involved has to be equal members in the cast of this play, if you want to think of it that way. It's not easy to enter into dialogue and be able to trust from every person, from maybe the people in large foundations to little ones like mine, to people on the ground in Haiti, to illiterate farmers. But we all have to be involved in the same dialogue, and our voices have to equally count. In my talk, I'll share a story about a good friend of mine, an illiterate Haitian farmer woman, told me about how our American dollars were funding a leader who was stealing their coffee beans, abusing your girls and forcing them to have abortions. You know, we don't often hear those stories that happen behind the scenes, but we must. And how do we build enough trust? Well, we start our stories with building trust, with guided dialogue, with relationship building, transparency before we enter into action. I'll share in my talk, too, how last fall, when a hurricane hit the village where I've worked all these many years, threw us into disaster relief mode. And my first thoughts were things like emergency rooms, tourniquets, triage. But people in the village saw the opportunity for a wellness plan. In my talk, I'll share how members of an international disaster relief agency said they'd like to work more like we do, and how a dating site showed me, of all things, that we actually could. Time's running out. We need to solve the story of poverty today, and the good news is, with your help, we can.